This vineyard is ours now. Zoe's voice purred through the cool, damp air of the family reserve vault, a space so sacred my grandfather barely let me breathe in it without supervision. I stood in the shadows, my hand resting on the rough stone wall, watching. My husband's mistress was running her manicured hand over a century-old French oak barrel, tracing the grain like she was claiming a prize. Austin stood beside her, swirling a glass of my family's 1945 Cabernet, a bottle worth more than his annual salary, and looking at her with the smug satisfaction of a man who thinks he has just inherited the earth. He smiled, that charming, flashy smile that had once convinced me he was a partner, not a parasite. "Cheers to the new management," he said, clinking his glass against hers. The sound echoed in the silence, sharp and discordant. I did not scream. I did not storm out and make a scene. I did not feel the hot rush of tears or the crushing weight of heartbreak. Instead, I felt a strange, icy calm settle over me. It was the clarity of a vintner spotting a flaw in the process, a leak in the cask, a rot in the vine. You do not cry over rot. You prune it. You cut it out before it infects the harvest. I pulled out my phone, the screen illuminating my face in the darkness. I opened the secure banking app, the one Austin did not know existed, and typed a single command: execute protocol vintage. I hit send. Then I turned and walked silently back up the stone stairs, leaving them to their premature celebration. 10 minutes later, we were at the charity gala, surrounded by the city's elite. Austin was beaming, his arm around my waist, playing the role of the devoted husband and successful director. He raised his paddle to bid $90,000 on a rare bottle, showing off for Zoe, who was watching from the periphery. The auctioneer banged the gavel. "Sold!" Austin handed over his platinum credit card with a flourish. And then the sound, a harsh, electronic beep, declined. He frowned, laughed nervously, and said, "Try it again. It is a platinum card." Beep. Declined. The room went quiet. All eyes turned to him. His smile faltered. He looked at me, confusion and panic starting to crack his composure. "Grace?" he whispered. "What is going on?" I leaned in close, so only he could hear. My voice soft and lethal. "Welcome to your new life, Austin. You own nothing here. Drop a comment and let me know where you are listening from and what time it is for you right now. I would love to know who is part of our community." It started 12 hours earlier, under the deceptive warmth of the Sonoma morning sun. I was sitting at my desk in the main estate office, reviewing soil sample reports, when Austin walked in. He looked the part of the director of global sales, a title I had invented for him, along with a salary that exceeded the industry standard by 300%. He was wearing a bespoke suit, the fabric catching the light, and carrying 2 espressos. He placed one on my desk with that practiced, easy grace that had charmed me 5 years ago. He kissed my forehead, lingering just long enough to suggest affection before pivoting to the real agenda. "Grace," he said, keeping his voice casual, "I need an expedited transfer authorized. It is for the hospitality fund. The European distributors are flying in early, and I want to secure the venues. I need $456,000. $456,000. He said the number smoothly, without a stutter, without a blink. He did not look at me. He looked at his reflection in the window behind me, adjusting his tie. In that split second, the air in the room shifted. It was a sensation I knew well. My grandfather had taught me to identify a compromised vintage by scent alone. The faint, acrid smell of vinegar that meant the cask had leaked, the wood had rotted, and the wine was poison. I looked at Austin, and I smelled the rot. I knew every distributor in our network. I knew their names, their children's birthdays, and their preferred vintages. There were no European distributors flying in. The expansion project was still in the drafting phase. He was lying. And he was lying with the confidence of a man who believed I was too in love, or perhaps too busy, to notice the details. He thought I was just the bank. I did not gasp. I did not ask him to clarify. I did not let a single flicker of suspicion cross my face. I simply smiled the same polite, detached smile I used for competitors I was about to acquire. "Of course," I said. We cannot have them thinking we are cutting corners. I pulled up the banking interface on my screen. The blue light of the monitor felt cold against my skin, a sharp contrast to the golden vineyard light spilling through the windows. I typed in his authorization code. I watched his eyes track my fingers. He was salivating. "Approved," I said, hitting enter. "You are the best," he said, grabbing his coffee. "I really appreciate it, Grace." He walked out, whistling, believing he had just successfully stolen nearly $500,000 from his wife. The moment the heavy oak door clicked shut, I stood up and turned the lock. The click was loud in the silence. I walked back to my desk and sat down. Hysteria is for people who do not have a contingency plan. I felt a strange, clinical detachment wash over me. I was not a wife discovering a betrayal anymore. I was a CEO discovering a liability. I opened the internal server and pulled up the forensic accounting software. It was time to audit the books. George, our family estate manager, and the only man my grandfather trusted with the combination to the main vault, sat across from me in the secure study. The room smelled of old paper and mahogany, a stark contrast to the digital crime scene unfolding on his laptop screen. He did not say a word. He did not offer platitudes or shock. He simply turned the monitor toward me. The spreadsheet was a map of betrayal, categorized and itemized with forensic precision. $96,000. That was the down payment on a vintage Porsche 911 wired to a dealership in Los Angeles 3 weeks ago, $9,000 a month. That was the lease on a penthouse condo in the Marina District, listed under a shell company called Reserve Ventures. The tenant on the lease was not a venture capitalist. It was Zoe. I stared at the numbers, and for a terrifying moment, I did not feel anger. I felt a heavy, suffocating sense of recognition. I had not just missed these red flags, I had actively paved over them. I looked at the director title next to Austin's name on the payroll log, a title I had created, a salary I had inflated to 300% of the market rate. I realized then that I had not just married Austin, I had constructed him. When you are a woman running a multi-generational empire, the world is waiting for you to stumble. It is lonely at the top of the vineyard. You spend your days armored in tailored suits and iron resolve, fighting for every inch of respect. When I met Austin, I did not want a competitor. I wanted a sanctuary. I wanted a place to take the armor off. But I knew that a man with a fragile ego could not handle a woman who owned the land he walked on. So, I built an armor for him too. I gave him the status so he would not feel small standing in my shadow. I gave him the credit for deals he did not close so he would feel necessary. I thought that if I made him feel like a king, he would not resent the queen. I subsidized his confidence with my capital. I thought I was investing in a partnership, building a foundation of mutual respect. But looking at the lease for his mistress's apartment, paid for with the dividends of my grandfather's labor, I saw the truth. I had bought his loyalty, but he only loved the purchase price. He did not love the woman. He loved the lifestyle she afforded him. George cleared his throat, pulling me back from the edge of my own regret. He looked at me, and I saw a flicker of pity in his eyes. I straightened my spine, the coldness returning to my veins. "Don't," I said, my voice sharp. "We do not pity bad investments, George. We liquidate them." I reached out and tapped the screen, pointing to the transfer logs. "Trace every cent," I commanded. "I want to know exactly how much it cost me to build a man who never existed." Darius, our head of security and a man who treated my safety as a personal crusade, had installed the surveillance feed 24 hours earlier. He called it an audit of physical assets. I called it necessary espionage. I sat in the reserve vault, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and aging oak, watching the monitor. The feed was from the tasting room, a space reserved for our most prestigious clients. Austin and Zoe were there now. Zoe was perched on the edge of the antique tasting table, her legs swinging casually. She held a glass of the 1945 Cabernet, a vintage so rare we only had 3 bottles left in existence. Austin poured himself a glass, the deep red liquid catching the light. He did not savor it. He gulped it down like it was water. "It is almost too easy," Zoe said, tracing the rim of her glass. "She trusts you completely. Does she suspect anything about the Asian expansion?" "She thinks it is visionary," Austin scoffed. He refilled his glass, spilling a drop on the pristine white tablecloth. He did not even notice. "Grace loves the idea of legacy. She thinks I am building the brand. She has no idea I am just stripping the copper wiring out of the walls before we burn the house down." I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. It was not just greed. It was contempt. I watched as Austin leaned back, his expression darkening. "You know what I hate most about her?" he asked, his voice dripping with venom. "It is the way she gives things. She acts like she is so benevolent, handing me titles and bonuses. But every time she signs a check, she is reminding me that she holds the pen. She thinks she is empowering me, but she is just keeping me on a leash. I am tired of being the queen's pet. I want to be the king." This was the narcissistic injury, the deep, festering wound of a man who could not stand the fact that his success was a gift, not an achievement. He did not hate me because I was cruel. He hated me because my competence made him feel small. And his solution was not to rise to my level. It was to drag me down to his. "And the plan for the gala?" Zoe asked, her eyes gleaming. "It is set," Austin said. He pulled a small vial from his pocket. "We spike her first drink, just enough to make her slurry, maybe stumble a bit. We call the medics, claim she is having a relapse. Public intoxication at her own charity event? The board will invoke the morality clause before the appetizers are cleared. They will strip her of the CEO title to protect the brand image. And as her husband, I will step in with power of attorney to manage the transition." They clinked glasses again. "To the new management," Zoe purred. I turned off the monitor. The silence in the vault was absolute. They were going to drug me. They were going to frame me for addiction, a disease my father had fought and died from to steal my family's legacy. I looked at the rows of barrels, the silent witnesses to generations of hard work and integrity. Austin thought he was poisoning the queen. He did not realize he had just poured poison into his own cup. I picked up my phone and dialed Patricia. "It is time," I said. "Operation Vintage is a go." I convened the War Council in the deepest part of the cellar, a room usually reserved for blending our most complex reds. The air was cool and smelled of fermentation, the scent of transformation. George sat on a barrel crate, his laptop open on a makeshift table. Patricia, our corporate litigator and a woman who could dismantle a hostile takeover before her morning coffee, stood by the stone wall, reviewing the dossier I had compiled. We were not planning a divorce. We were planning a corporate restructuring disguised as a liquidation. "I do not want a settlement," I told them, my voice echoing off the limestone. "I want a total recall of assets. If I fire him now, he sues for spousal support and drags the brand through the mud. I need him to incriminate himself so deeply that he has no leverage left." Patricia smiled, a sharp, dangerous expression. "Then we give him exactly what he wants," she said. "He wants capital? Let us give him an ocean of it." She outlined the plan for the ghost account. It was a masterpiece of financial engineering. We would create a digital mirror, a sub-account within the family trust that mimicked the interface of his shell company's bank. On his screen, it would look like liquid cash. In reality, it was a closed loop. The money would leave the main operating account, travel through a routing number controlled by George, and land right back in the trust's secure vault. "It is a honeypot," George said, tapping his keyboard. He sees the numbers, he feels the rush, but he cannot spend a dime. And the moment he tries to move it, the system flags it as attempted wire fraud. "Perfect," I said. I smoothed my skirt and stood up. "I have a husband to lie to." I found Austin in the sunroom, looking over architectural renderings for a house in Napa, a property I knew he planned to buy with Zoe. He looked up, startled, hiding the papers. I walked over and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Austin," I said, injecting a note of apology into my voice. "I have been thinking about what you said, about the Asian market expansion. You were right. I have been holding you back." His eyes lit up. He sat straighter. You think so? I do. I want to invest in your vision. I want to fully fund the expansion. I paused, letting the number hang in the air before I dropped it. $6 million. Wired directly to your operational LLC. I want you to have the autonomy you deserve. He stood up, breathless. Grace, that is huge. You will not regret this. I promise. I am going to take Silver Vines global. I know you will, I said. Let us do the transfer now. I sat at his computer. I logged into the main portal. I entered the routing number for the ghost account. I typed in $6 million. My finger hovered over the enter key. I looked at him one last time. I did not see my husband. I saw a bad vintage, acidic, unstable, and destined for the drain. Execute, I said softly, and pressed the key. The screen flashed. Transfer successful. Austin let out a shout of triumph, hugging me, spinning me around. He was celebrating his fortune. I was celebrating the fact that he had just voluntarily tied the noose around his own neck. He thought he had the capital to destroy me. He did not know he was holding a grenade with the pin already pulled. The trap was set. The bait was taken. But Patricia was not celebrating. She stood in the center of the cellar, under the low stone arches, holding a sheaf of documents with a grim expression that made the temperature in the room drop 10 degrees. I had just finished transferring the fake $6 million, feeling a surge of victory, but Patricia's silence cut through my satisfaction like a pruning shear. We have a problem, she said, tossing the file onto the makeshift table. Or rather, Austin has a much bigger problem than we thought. And so do you. I picked up the file. It was a loan agreement from a private equity firm in Hong Kong, predatory lenders known for seizing assets first and asking questions later. I scanned the terms. It was a high-risk futures contract, pre-selling the next 5 years of our reserve vintage before the grapes had even flowered. But it was the collateral clause that made my blood run cold. He did not just leverage the wine, Grace, Patricia said, her voice hard. Look at the addendum. I flipped the page. There, listed as security for the loan, were the deeds to the North Block, the heart of the estate, the land my great-grandfather had bought with his own hands, and at the bottom of the page was a signature, Grace Sterling. It was my name. It looked like my handwriting. But the date next to it was from 3 days ago, when I was in the city meeting with distributors. He forged my signature, I whispered. The realization was not a shock. It was a physical blow. Embezzlement was one thing, stealing cash from the till. But this was selling the ground out from under my feet. He had risked the entire legacy, the land itself, to fund his delusions of grandeur. This is not just civil theft anymore, Patricia said, pacing the small room. This is federal wire fraud and bank fraud. He used your identity to secure a high-risk loan against property he does not own. If he defaults, and with the way he spends, he will default in 6 months. They come for the land. They come for the vineyard. I looked at the forged signature. It was shaky, a poor imitation of the confident stroke I used to sign checks. It was the signature of a desperate man. So the plan changes, George said from the corner, his face pale. We cannot just humiliate him. We have to neutralize him. I closed the file. The anger that had been a cold knot in my chest expanded, filling every part of me. He wanted to frame me for addiction. He wanted to steal my company. He had tried to sell my heritage. Call the district attorney, I said, my voice steady and dark. Tell them we have the evidence. We are not just locking him out of the accounts tonight. We are handing him over to the authorities. The gala is not a party anymore. It is a crime scene. I stood up, smoothing the silk of my dress. Tonight, Austin thinks he is celebrating his ascent to the throne. He does not realize he is walking into his own execution. I looked at the time. The gala started in 2 hours. Let us go, I said. I want to see his face when the bill finally comes due. The charity gala was a spectacle of excess, held in the main barrel room under chandeliers made of recycled crystal. Austin was in his element, holding court near the stage. Zoe hovering nearby in a dress that cost more than my first car paid for. Of course, with the down payment for the fictitious Asian expansion, I watched him from the balcony, a flute of sparkling water in my hand. He looked like a king. He did not know he was already a prisoner. The auction began at 11. The centerpiece was a Nebuchadnezzar of our reserve Cabernet, a bottle so heavy it required 2 men to carry it onto the stage. Bidding started at 20,000. Austin's hand shot up. 30,000. 40. He was bidding against the mayor, laughing, showing off the depth of his pockets. $90,000, he shouted, his voice booming across the room. Going once? Going twice? Sold! The room erupted in applause. Austin bowed theatrically, then turned to me. He walked over, carrying 2 glasses of champagne. Here, darling, he said, loud enough for the board members nearby to hear. Let us toast to the future. To us. I looked at the glass. The liquid was golden, effervescent, and undoubtedly laced with the sedative he had shown Zoe in the tasting room. This was the moment. He expected me to drink, to stumble, to slur my words in front of the press and the investors. He expected to catch me as I fell, the concerned husband taking control of his addict wife. I took the glass. His eyes widened in anticipation. Then I walked past him, straight up the stairs to the microphone on the stage. The room quieted. Austin looked confused, but he held his smile, waiting for his toast. Thank you all for coming, I said, my voice steady and amplified. Tonight is about clarity. It is about seeing things for what they really are. I gestured to the large screen behind me, usually reserved for donor names. A graph appeared, a flat green line. For the last 6 hours, I have been wearing a continuous biosensor, I explained, tapping the small device on my wrist. It tracks blood alcohol content in real time. As you can see, I am stone cold sober. And this, I held up the glass Austin had given me, contains enough benzodiazepines to knock out a horse. A gasp rippled through the room. Austin's smile vanished. He took a step forward. Grace, you are not well. Play the tape, George, I commanded. The speakers crackled, and then Austin's voice filled the room, clear and damning. We spike her first drink, claim she is having a relapse. I will step in with power of attorney. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Austin stood frozen, the color draining from his face. Zoe tried to back away into the crowd, but security blocked the exits. I walked down the stairs and stood in front of him. He looked at me, his eyes darting around, looking for an escape, looking for the narrative he had lost control of. Run the card, Austin, I said softly. Pay for your $90,000 bottle. He looked at the waiter holding the credit card terminal. He pulled out his platinum card with a trembling hand. He swiped it. The machine beeped, a harsh, dissonant sound. Declined. Try it again, he whispered. I have $6 million in that account. No, you do not, I said. You have a mirror image of a zero balance. I revoked the transfer 10 minutes ago. The money is gone. The Asian expansion is gone. The Porsche is being towed as we speak. He stared at me, his world collapsing in real time. But I am the director. I built this. No, Austin. I leaned in close, delivering the truth like a final verdict. You confused having a key to the gate with owning the land. You were never the owner. You were just a guest, and guests can be evicted. I nodded to the back of the room. The doors opened, and 4 police officers walked in. They were not there for the noise complaint. They were there for the federal wire fraud and the forgery Patricia had uncovered in the cellar. As they handcuffed him, Austin did not scream. He just looked at me with the hollow eyes of a man who realized he had traded a kingdom for a mirage. The rain had started, a gentle drizzle that softened the harsh lights of the gala tent. I stood at the edge of the terrace, watching as the police cars drove away, their red and blue lights reflecting on the wet pavement. Austin and Zoe were in the back of separate cruisers. They did not leave with dignity. They left with nothing. The Asian market expansion account was closed. The Porsche was being loaded onto a flatbed truck by a repo team Patricia had scheduled perfectly. The lease on the penthouse was terminated effective immediately. Zoe had tried to grab her purse, a limited edition designer bag Austin had bought with company funds, but security had confiscated it as evidence. She had walked out into the rain empty-handed, shivering in her couture dress, realizing too late that she had bet on a horse that was already lame. I turned back to the vineyard. The guests had left, whispering and shocked, but I did not care about the gossip. I cared about the silence. For the first time in 5 years, the noise in my head, the constant hum of managing Austin's ego, of protecting him, of pretending, was gone. George walked up beside me, handing me a glass of water. "It is done," he said quietly. "The DA is building the case. With the forged deeds and the wire fraud, he is looking at 10 years minimum. And the land?" "Secure," George said. "We stopped the transfer before the ink was dry. The North Block is safe." I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of the rain and the vines. I walked down the stone steps and out into the rows of grapes. The mud ruined my shoes, but I did not stop until I reached the oldest vine on the property, a gnarled, thick trunk planted by my great-grandfather. I placed my hand on the rough bark. It felt solid, real. Austin had tried to sell this. He had tried to uproot history for a quick cash grab. He thought value was something you could transfer in a bank account. He did not understand that true value is in the roots. It is in the resilience to weather the storm and still produce fruit. I walked back to the reserve vault one last time. Patricia was there, packing up the files. "What now?" she asked. "Now we rebuild," I said. I picked up the pen and signed the final document of the night. It was not a lawsuit. It was a grant. I am taking the $5,016,000 we recovered from his accounts, plus the liquidation of his assets, and I am starting a scholarship fund. For women in viticulture, Patricia smiled. "He is going to hate that." "I hope he does," I said. "I hope every time he hears the name Silver Vines, he remembers that he did not just lose a wife. He lost an empire he never deserved to touch." The next morning, I woke up alone in the master suite. The silence was not lonely. It was peaceful. I made my own coffee. I walked out onto the balcony and looked over the estate. The sun was rising, turning the mist into gold. I did not need armor anymore. I did not need to protect anyone's ego. I was Grace Sterling, and I was the owner of this land, not just by deed, but by right of survival. Check your deeds, ladies. Check your accounts. And never, ever let someone live in your house who does not understand the value of the foundation.